The Adventure of Jaka. A long time ago, there was a happy couple named Mr. Prabhu and Mrs. Mayang who lived in a beautiful, peaceful village by the edge of the forest. Life was good, and they were about to welcome even more joy because Mrs. Mayang were expecting their first child. As her pregnancy reached 9 months, Mrs. Mayang suddenly had a craving. "Honey, I really want to eat venison. I think our baby is asking for it," she said to her husband. Mr. Prabhu smiled and replied, "Don't worry, my dear. I'll hunt a deer for you. Just make sure to cook it nicely when I bring it home." The next morning, Mr. Prabhu got ready to go hunting and said goodbye to his wife. "Be careful, my husband. I'll be waiting for you to come back," said Mrs. Mayang. Mr. Prabhu nodded and smiled. "I'll be back soon, my love," he said, then left for the forest. In the forest, he spotted a deer grazing near the entrance of a cave. He quickly aimed and shot his arrow, hitting the deer perfectly. As he went closer to retrieve it, out of nowhere, a giant snake emerged from the cave. Before he could react, the snake swallowed Mr. Prabhu in one big gulp. "Ah, that was satisfying. Time for a long nap," the snake muttered as it slithered back into the cave. Back home, Mrs. Mayang waited and waited, but Mr. Prabhu did not return. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Eventually, Mrs. Mayang gave birth to their baby boy and named him Jaka. "Your son is here, honey. I miss you so much. Please come home," she whispered, holding her baby because Mr. Prabhu never came back. The villagers started calling her Mbok Rondo, or a widow. Years went by and Jaka grew into a strong, handsome young man, but he was often teased by his friends for not having a father, and he hated that the villagers called his mother Mbok Rondo. When he turned 17, Jaka decided he'd had enough. "Mother, I'm going to the forest to find father," he said. Mrs. Mayang was terrified and tried to stop him. "I've already lost your father. I cannot lose you too," she said. But Jaka was determined. Finally, with a heavy heart, Mrs. Mayang let him go. "Promise me you will come back," she said, holding back tears to his son. Jaka ventured into the forest with some supplies his mother prepared for him. After wandering for a while, he found a huge cave and decided to take a break. Inside, he saw a giant snake sleeping soundly, but as Jaka entered, the snake woke up and attacked him. Jaka fought bravely and, with a swift strike, managed to cut the snake in half. From the snake's belly, his father, Mr. Prabhu, stumbled out alive. Jaka introduced himself, and Mr. Prabhu was overjoyed to realize that his savior was his own son. The two returned to the village, where Mrs. Mayang greeted them with tears of happiness. From that day on, the three of them lived happily ever after as a united family. That is the end of the story, and the moral of the story is that courage, determination, and love of family can overcome even the greatest challenges. Jaka's bravery and persistence not only saved his father but also reunited his family, showing that facing fears and taking action can lead to happiness and fulfillment. It also highlights the importance of resilience and never giving up on loved ones, no matter how difficult the journey may seem.